It's always a pleasure to come to Chattanooga. I've been down here several times since I've been brigade commander, and as I have said in the past, the Knoxville camp, when I joined back in '94, we took our our strength and our courage from looking at what Chattanooga was doing. We said, you know, if Chattanooga's got so many members, then we ought to be able to do that too. And of course, our camp has grown quite a bit, and it's my understanding that you all are continuing to grow and have several members pending as of today. And the Mountain Brigade, I will tell you, is alive and well. I was in Benton on Sunday to see a monument dedicated, and let me ask you this. Where could you go today that the county executive would come and speak, and the high school band, the local high school band, would come and play Dixie, not once but twice? I mean, there's not many places that happens. But we saw it Sunday. And it was, of course, the UDC from Tellico Plains was the ones that was putting it on, and it was, we had a grand time. At this time, I want to introduce a friend of mine that's going to come and speak to you. Frank Scarpino, I first met, about 8 years ago. He called me up, he introduced himself on the phone, said, you know, I'm from Florida, and I thought, man, that accent, he ain't from around here. But as Frank says, I said, he's hardcore, and Frank is. I promise you, this is not going to be a politically correct speech. The only place you could be tonight and be more politically incorrect would be a cockfight in Union County. Union County. So Frank, why don't you come up here and tell them about your hero, Abraham Lincoln?
Well, thank you very much, Brigade Commander and newsletter editor, and my personal technical guru is Mom. And then Lynn, you would need to see his uniform. He is a Confederate officer par excellence. No, he's got a heck of a uniform. Let me tell you a little bit about bio first, okay? I was born about 15 miles west of New York City, on the Jersey side. I was very young at the time, so I had no choice of where I was going to be born. That's why I am a Confederate by choice. That's the worst kind. You will agree with that after you hear what we say. We'll discuss it. The thing is, I had a unique experience of going to school when I was in the 7th grade up in New Jersey. We studied the Civil War, and the book was probably written in New York, and the teacher was, well, going. Teacher was reading what was in the book, too. Didn't know anything about that. So it was basically the good guys wore the blue, the bad guys wore the gray, the war was about slavery, and Abraham Lincoln was the greatest person that ever walked the earth, with the possible exception of Jesus. But it was close. The next year, my family moved to South Florida when it was still Southern, and it was still Old South. Now it's like New York City with palm trees. However, in the 8th grade, we studied the War of Northern Aggression, and the book must have been written in Richmond. The instructor or the teacher, I don't remember his name, Clayton R. Wilkes. Clayton R. Wilkes from Stone Mountain, Georgia. And it was the exact opposite of what I had heard the year before. There I was 13 years old, a little confused, not too interested in school, raging hormones, finding out kind of what girls are like. And I didn't care much about learning, but it still, at the time, it confused the heck out of me. Because instead of hearing about the sainthood of these people in blue, I'm hearing about Dishonest Abe and Useless S. Grant and Firebug Sherman and people like that. And wait, who's lying? Somebody's lying. But see, that's the brain of a 13-year-old kid. Which one of you is lying to me? Actually, neither one of them were. I was getting two sides of the same story. And therein lies the rub. There's always two sides to a story. That's when I was 13 years old. I don't want to tell you what year that was. I'm older than I look. That was a long time ago. Nowadays, they are teaching that same trash and drivel to the kids even in the South. My daughter graduated high school 2 years ago. I went there and listened. Every kid that got up to make a speech referenced something to the greatness of Lincoln. And my wife grabbed me by the shoulders, and I'm ready to come out of the chair. No. They teach them all of this stuff and indoctrinate these kids in school. In order to find this stuff out, you need to do your own research. Okay? And that brings us to what we're going to talk about tonight. That is refuting, or the refutation, if you want to sound real formal about it. Refutation of slavery as the main cause of the war. One of the biggest problems we run into in public discourse today is this propaganda about slavery was the cause of the war. Period. That's it. No matter what you say, no matter how you try to justify it, slavery was the cause of the war. States' rights means slavery. States' rights mean, and this type of closed-minded people like that. Okay? Tonight we're going to get some ammo that we can combat that with. Okay? There's a whole bunch of stuff up here. Please don't worry about trying to remember. There's going to be lots of facts and figures and quotes thrown at you. Don't try to read. Just take them in, because after we're done here, I want to give everybody a copy of all the notes and a couple other little things. We're going to have the commander read an act of Congress for you. And we'll all have it. So you'll have it right in your hand. Anybody who wants to can take this home. And please go out and tell everybody you know about some of the things we learned here. Okay? And another little disclaimer. This is not all I didn't make this stuff up. I gathered it. And I'll give you a little suggested reading list too, which some of this came from. And that anything I say up here can be backed up in documents and books or in the ORs or anything like that. ORs is the biggest phony document ever written. The official reports. You ever look at those closely? And see, those are the commander's reports of the battles. How many commanders have you ever seen that put in the report, "Man, we get whooped"? You're not going to do that. It's not human nature. It just would not be in the psyche of a human general, especially, to say, "Man, we get our tails whooped really bad." So, what they do is we'll say, "Our men fought valiantly until they were out of bullets, and then they picked up rocks and sticks, and then they fought, and we were surrounded on 8 sides, and we had to begrudgingly give ground an inch at a time and made an orderly retreat." Okay? You know what that means? "Man, we get whooped." That's the type of stuff. That it's very self-serving. And so is the history for today, too. So let's take a little closer look at this baloney about slavery being the major cause of the war. And I'm not here to tell anybody that it didn't have anything to do with slavery. It did, but not for the reasons those folks think it did. You know what free soil meant? Free soilers. Hey, yes, it's free soil. Everybody. That didn't mean freedom for Negroes. It meant freedom from Negroes. Lincoln wanted to keep those territories. See, he wasn't an abolitionist. He was far from an abolitionist. He wanted to keep those territories that were going to become states from becoming slave states for 2 reasons. One was the overwhelming vote the North had over the South in Congress already. Wanted to keep it that way, where they could use the South as a cash cow, because it paid over 70%. That's the lowest figure I've seen of the income. It was not income tax as we have it today. The war gave us that. It was impost or import taxes that it generated by having raw materials. If you have raw materials and one part of the country sells raw materials to England, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Western Europe, and the other half has finished goods, who's going to be doing the most trading with Europe? Obviously the people that have the raw materials, right? So, and none of those ships wanted to go back and forth empty. The tariffs, the infamous Morrill tariff, which was passed after the first 7 states seceded, so they could get it through, and there was no competition, jacked those taxes up to where it was about half again as much as the item was worth, we're going to pay in tariffs. Those tariffs went to the federal government on the back, so to speak, of the producers in the South, and it was spent disproportionately on northern interests. The three planks of the platform of the Republican Party in 1860, which is a far cry from what the Republican Party is today. I hope everybody knows. There are still some people in the old South that think the Democrats are the conservatives. That went by a long time ago. The 3 planks were high import tariffs, national banking, government controls the money, good to be the king, and the biggest boondoggle of them all was how that money was spent. Internal improvements, which today is something like corporate welfare and stuff like that, where they would enrich and take care of the railroad interests, the canal building and stuff like this in the North, and a good 80% of that money was spent in the North. So you see where we're going here? This is the big rub. When they put the slavery thing out or the propaganda afterwards, that didn't happen until actually 2 years into the war, when they started declaring that the war was about slavery. So what it was put a happy face on an invasion. That's exactly what it did. Let's see what Charles Dickens had to say. 1861. Now I'm going to read some quotes. Charles Dickens said, "Union means so many millions a year lost to the South. Secession means the loss of the same millions to the North. The love of money is the root of this, as of many, many other evils. The quarrel between the North and South is, as it stands, solely a fiscal quarrel." Charles Dickens, famous British novelist or storyman, said that. Now he had a contemporary antagonist by the name of John Stuart Mill, who was one of these elitists who thought that empire was the way to go, and central governments are what. So did Karl Marx. Now, Charles Dickens also said at the end of the war, the northern onslaught upon slavery was no more than a piece of specious humbug. I like that word, specious. Specious humbug designed to conceal the desire for economic control of the southern states. Boom, he nailed it. That's the reason for the war right there. It was designed to conceal the economic control of the southern states. Patrick Henry in 1788 said, "The government subjects everything to northern majority. Is there not then a settled purpose to check the southern interest? How can the southern members prevent the adoption of the most oppressive mode of taxation in the southern states, as there is a majority in favor of the northern states?" In the Senate, each state has 2 representatives. You have 2 senators. So it's even, right? It's even unless you have more states in one part than you have in the other part. The North had many more states than the South did. That gave them control. They had voting power, where they could outvote the South on everything. And it was a lot worse in the Congress, because that goes on population. And we're talking about more than 22 million people in the North, as opposed to 9 in the South, including black servants who did not vote. That they were way outnumbered. So that's what he's saying right here. In the first inaugural, Abraham Lincoln said, a lot of people quote him on the first inaugural, all the famous things he said. Well, here's something he said: "I would use federal power to hold federal property and to collect the duties and imposts." Remember what imposts are? Import taxes, yes. Okay? "But beyond what may be necessary for these objects, there will be no invasion, no using of force against or among the people anywhere." See, that's what there will be. Abraham Lincoln said there's going to be no invasion, there's going to be no use of force of the people anywhere. Let's look at this again. "Beyond what may be necessary for these objects." necessary to collect taxes in a country that's not yours anymore, that is foreign, that is actually legally separated? That would be like us collecting taxes in the port of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, or go around the world. How about Murmansk in Russia? It would be just as illegal to do in any of those places as it would be for them to collect taxes in South Carolina. Fort Sumter was taken and occupied illegally, of course, by Major Anson, who's from Kentucky, by the way. They were going to use that as the revenue collection, the customs house, because it guarded the ship channel coming into Charleston. So they figured they're going to keep collecting taxes. We don't care if South Carolina has seceded. We don't care if 6 other states went out with them and they're going to form a sort of... They still wanted to collect the taxes. Okay? Up to now, has slavery entered into this anywhere? No, obviously it hasn't. Now, Lincoln, what he said there was, he said, beyond these purposes, there will be no invasion. He was threatening either we continue collecting the imposts, or we're going to invade you. He was offering taxes or war. Which one you want? That's all it can be broken down to. Okay? Between the North, the war between the North and the South is a tariff war. The war is further, and not for any principle, does not touch the question of slavery, and in fact turns on the Northern lust for empire. Guess who said that? Karl Marx, the father of communism. Surprised? I was. It blew me off the chair when I saw that. Karl Marx told the truth. That's like, no, I better not get into that. Don't say that. Okay. Here's Woodrow Wilson. President Woodrow Wilson later, looking back on it, said that it was necessary to put the South at a moral disadvantage by transforming the contest from a war waged against states fighting for their independence into a war against states fighting for the maintenance and extension of slavery. And what is it we hear all the time now? The constant drumbeat of they want to maintain and the South fought to preserve slavery and this and that. Actually, let me tell you about another book. Well, there's a couple of them that this guy wrote. His name is Marshall de Rosa, nice Italian guy from Florida Atlantic University, and I knew him when I was in Florida. He is the foremost Confederate constitutional expert in this country. Nobody would challenge him on that. He knows that thing. He's got it memorized, back and forth. He put down there that he wrote several books on the Confederate Constitution. And what he did was laid all of this out and showed that the Confederate Constitution was a model, first, of conservatism, and secondly, of common sense. Of course, when you stop and think about it, the South had an advantage when they went to do their Constitution, because they had the advantage of being in the Union for 80 years and seeing any flaws come out in the original Constitution, and they could fix it. So they did. They made 1 6-year presidential term, no politicking while you're in office, no campaigning while you're in office to get reelected. You can't. You go in there for 6 years, do the best job you're capable of doing, and then go home. Right? Appropriations. One thing, line item veto. No pork. If the president's honest, he kicks out all the pork, all the junk in the bill and says, yeah, we'll send it forward this way. Line item veto. Check, check, check. I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. I like this, I don't like that. They also had no public funds for any private endeavors. That all had to be privately done. All of this, the government shouldn't give money away. I'm going to get struck by lightning. 7 trillion, what have we done? I was telling my friends on the way down that a lady was talking to me about that. She didn't like that one time. I do tours at the Federal Memorial Hall in Knoxville, and this one lady was been a little yankified and on the liberal side, and she said, "Can't we just see the house instead of listening to this rhetoric?" And I said, "Well, it makes sense." I said, "Because our stimulus package is like me giving you all my credit cards and telling you, it's okay, go ahead and go shopping and max them all out. It'll help me in the future." Does that make any sense to you? Her husband was laughing so hard I thought he was going to urinate in his pants. But it was really funny because that's it. I mean, how do you do things like that? You know, nobody's ever spent their way to prosperity yet. So, okay. Anyway. How about the foreign press? What do they have to say? London Times. The contest is really for empire on the side of the North and for independence on that of the South. They nailed it. That's exactly what it was for. It was for independence. When the colonies wanted their revolution and their independence from Mother England, it was a great, glorious revolution. Now, a section of the country that was being overtaxed, overburdened, overgoverned by the stronger section wanted to peacefully withdraw and form their own government, then that's traitorous, that's secession, so the hypocrisy there just overwhelms us. Okay? The London Times also said, and this one is really good, democracy broke down not when the Union ceased to be agreeable to all its constituent states, but when it was upheld, like any other empire, by force of arms. Not a voluntary union anymore, is it? And I always tell people that when I take them through the tours, we get into this philosophics. I don't know who initiates this stuff. But, hey, you pay your money, you're going to listen. So most of them all end up wanting to shake hands on the way out. I mean, we're all friends. But I tell people that if you think that that this war was all about slavery and preserving the Union and all of this stuff like that, you got to ask yourself one question. One question. Answer it honestly. No flippy answers. No sarcastic answers. No beating around the bush or waffling and doing like the politicians do. An honest answer. Okay. Here's the question: of what value is a voluntary union of states if it has to be held together at the point of a gun, or a bayonet, or by force of arms of any kind? Okay? There's only one answer to that question. No matter how you spin it, no matter how you rationalize it, there's only one answer. None! It's of no value whatsoever, because at the moment force is used, it is no longer voluntary. Now, you know who said that? Of all people, the biggest elitist in the country, Alexander Hamilton. He said that in the Federalist Papers. He was lying, of course, but the other people that wrote the Federalist Papers, Madison and John Jay, first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, they were sincere. And Hamilton was going along with them because he's a politician. They were trying to get New York State, especially because it was the biggest that didn't want to sign on to the new Constitution. And other states they knew would follow in New England. They were trying to convince them that the central government would not be despotic, would not be overbearing. It would only have small, defined powers. And the other powers, not specifically, I'm talking 9th and 10th Amendments of the Constitution, if it sounds familiar to anybody, which are largely ignored today. Any powers which are not specifically delegated to the central government are specifically retained by the individual states or the people of those states. Right? So, in that vein, they more or less authorized the central government enough power to represent the states in foreign dealings with foreign countries and speak for them in aggregate as a group and do things like coin money, have a post office. I think would be much more applicable and easier to do as one group than it would be as 25, 50, 30, how many states you ever had, and over the time it grew up to 50 states. Can you imagine having 50 different armies and 50 different post offices? It just doesn't work. It would be much easier to do it with one. Those are the powers that were ceded to the federal government, nothing more. Is it that way now? Of course not. It's all centralized. We all have to jump at the commands from Washington City. Washington, D.C., they call it Washington, D.C. during the war. But that was a centralized government. So you know what the biggest casualty of that war was? The U.S. Constitution. The Founding Fathers set it up this way, to where the states would have most of the power. That's what states' rights is. It's the states retain their own sovereignty, their own power. When they were given the Treaty of Paris, and I've read it, I've looked at it, and it addresses them as the United States, but not as a country. The United States in America, and it lists the 13 states or colonies, and actually they were each given a treaty, and they were each given their own sovereignty. And then other people come up with the argument, well, that was good for the first 13, but what about any other state that joined after that? That shouldn't apply. They wouldn't have the right to secede. I don't know. Tell me what state in this union has more power, privileges, or higher status than any other state? They think they do. No, but other than that, they're all on an equal footing. Once they ratify the Constitution and they're accepted into the United States or the Union or however we term, they're then on equal footing. So that argument is full. It doesn't hold any water either. It's just a lot of baloney. All right, let's see what Mr. Lincoln said on the floor of the House of Representatives in 1848. Remember that year, 1840. Any people anywhere, being inclined and having the power, have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and form a new one that suits them better. This is the most valuable and most sacred right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world. Woohoo! What was going on in 1848? The German Revolution. The Red 48ers. Many of whom became Lincoln's generals. All the ones with the German names, except for a couple that were born in the United States, were ones that lost. The German, in 1848, there were a lot of little countries over there in Germany. And they, under this Marxist regime, communists tried to take over and make Germany one strong, independent country with a central government. Well, somebody else succeeded another century later. How did that turn out? It didn't work. They were defeated. They were lucky to get out of there with their skin. Many of them came over here. Karl Schurz, Franz Siegel, Alexander Schimmelpfennig, August V. Kautz. So they all became Lincoln's field generals later on in the war. Later on when the war started. So in 12 years, he sure changed his tune, saying that people could throw off the existing government until it changed to, you must remain in the Union. No kidding. Richmond Dispatch talks about June 12, 1881, selling Virginia Negroes in Cuba. We have heard from various sources a large number of the Negroes that have been captured by the northern invaders on the peninsula have been sent to Cuba to be sold, and that they declare their intention to make the sale of Negroes one means of defraying the expenses of the war. Now that sounds like some liberators to me, doesn't it to you? Okay. New York Tribune, Horace Greeley. Horace Greeley was I don't know what you call him, a do-gooder and a guy that really thought everything was cool and so forth. He just looked at the good in people, man. He thought, his editorials in the New York Tribune, widely read all over the country, up until early mid-March 1861, were things like, let those people go. their misguided sisters. Let them go. Let them take their peculiar institutions and ways with them, and we will be rid of them. Good riddance. He thought, rightly so, that if slavery was a big problem, it could be eliminated in the United States without firing a shot. And it could have. Simply let them secede. Take all the slaves with them. But what about the ones in the border states? If the border states stayed, then you do compensated emancipation, and nobody fights, nobody squawks, everybody wins. Okay? That was a happy end. Until he got summoned to Washington because Lincoln and Seward wanted to have a little sit down with this boy. And they told him, you know how many newspapers we've shut down for less than what you say? The only reason you're not being shut down is we want to give you a chance to redeem yourself. And they told him the real cause of the war. The real cause of the war was that they found out that the South was going to have some sort of a quasi-sweetheart deal with the European nations and pretty close to a free trade. Okay? Everybody here has probably heard that one quote from Lincoln. What will become of my tariffs? Who will pay my tariffs? That's where that came from. Who was going to pay the tariff? If the South was allowed to peacefully secede and carry on commerce with the people from Europe, from all the various countries there, and have a sweetheart deal, if you were a European business person shipping goods to the South and buying from the South, and you were going to Charleston, Mobile, Jacksonville, New Orleans, anywhere in your ports, would you rather go there and pay a token, maybe 5% tariff, or would you rather go to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and pay 50%? Now, that's a no-brainer. Nobody would want to pay all that extra money. First of all, because the North didn't have that much raw material. They would have to get it from the South, bring it up there. The price goes up because there's a middleman. It's simple, basic economics. Okay? After they told Horace Greeley that, he goes back to New York, and you know what it says in his headlines in his newspaper at the end of March? Grass will grow in the streets of New York City and Boston if this is allowed to happen. These people are traitors, they're rebels, they're scoundrels. They must be forced to stay in the Union. What was this war about? Always follow the money. Always follow the money. Wars are not fought for humanitarian purposes, folks. Even religious wars are not fought for humanitarian purposes. Look behind the facade and the happy face, and you will find out somebody either stands to make a lot of money, lose a lot of money, or both. And that's what wars are all about. Money and power, political power is money. Money can be converted to political power. Just ask George Soros. He runs this country now. Now, some of these other newspapers, I'll just read you a few of these real quick. Chicago Daily Times said in 1860, in one single blow, our foreign commerce will be reduced to less than 1/2 of what it is now. What's he talking about? Those poor slaves that need to be liberated? Sure. Okay, New York Times. We believe the apprehensions of economic losses to be greatly exaggerated. That was on December 7th. By January, another editor predicted that dramatic differences in tariffs, if the South's tariffs were much lower than the North, could spell disaster for Northern commerce. Change their tune a little bit, too. Philadelphia Press. The government cannot well avoid collecting the federal revenues at all Southern ports, even after the passage of secession ordinances. This duty is discharged. Any state which assumes a rebellious attitude will still be obliged to contribute revenue to support the federal government or have their foreign commerce entirely destroyed. That sounds like liberating slaves to me, doesn't it? What do you think, Spanish Shin? Oh, sorry. Now, he's going to heckle me while I'm up here. I got the microphone. Okay. Now, here's there's a couple of southern newspapers. Charleston Mercury, Robert Barnwell Rhett, said, the real causes of dissatisfaction in the South with the North are in the unjust taxation and expenditure of the taxes by the government of the United States. And in the revolution, the North has affected in this government from a confederated republic to a national sectional despotism. How did you know I was going to say that? Oh, I read it from it. That's exactly what we just mentioned, right? That's what the real thing was. Here what the Nolans Daily Crescent said. They, the South, know that it is their import trade that draws from the people's pockets 60 to 70 millions of dollars per annum in the shape of duties to be expended mainly in the North and in the protection and encouragement of Northern interests. These are the reasons why these people do not wish the South to secede from the Union. That make any sense? That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It makes an awful lot of sense because that's what it was about. Now, here's where they start getting really nasty. When you mess with somebody's money, they get mean. New York Herald on May 5th, 1861. When the rebellious traders are overwhelmed in the field and scattered like leaves before an angry wind, it must not be to return to peaceful and contented homes. They must find poverty at their firesides and seek privation in the anxious eyes of mothers and the rags of their children. Those are sister states, our compadres, our goombas. That's what why all the hate? You know why? Messing with their moolah. You're messing with their money. Now, a different editor in the New York Herald said he called for punishment of all individuals in the South by hanging. That's pretty cut and dried. And the confiscation of everybody's property in the seceding states. Richmond must be laid to ashes. Virginia and Maryland, which stayed in the Union by force, must be laid to waste and to be made desolate. We mean not merely to conquer, but to subjugate. Now these are quotes. These are coming right out of these newspapers. These people were vicious and nasty, and they wanted blood because somebody dared to mess with their finances, with their money. It's exactly what they did. In London Quarterly Review, it says, for the contest on the part of the North is now undisguisedly for empire. The question of slavery is thrown to the wind. There is hardly any concession in its favor that the South could ask, which the North would refuse. Provided only that the seceding states would re-enter the Union, away with the pretense of the North to dignify its cause with the name of freedom to the slave. Those people could see that war better from England than people right here, because they're too close to the conflict. Macmillan's magazine interviewed hundreds of Northerners, and it summarized that we do not claim to be carrying on a war for emancipation. Oh no. We are not fighting for the blacks, but for the whites. The object of the war is to preserve the Union. We'll talk about that in a minute. It is for clear matter of fact interest. That was even BS. But it was a good rallying point. Much better than the slavery thing. Because, remember, here's what, remember John Fremont, the Pathfinder? He was the first Republican to run for president in 1856. This is when the Republicans were the bad guys. Some of them still are, but Fremont went into Missouri and declared all slaves free there. He put up his Emancipation Proclamation. You know what happened, of course? Lincoln rescinded it and reassigned Fremont. So, a French news editor in 1862 said Fremont's dismissal has stopped the American conflict from becoming a cause of our civilization. What should we hate if not slavery? He wiped it out. What Lincoln said to Mrs. Fremont when she demanded an audience with him and asked what this was all about. I've never been so insulted in all my life. You know, usual routine. This is ridiculous. She goes in there and he tells her, quote, it was a war for a great national idea, the Union, and General Fremont should not drag the Negro into it. So he relieves Fremont, puts Major General David Hunter in charge. Ta-da! Pulls Fremont out. What does Hunter do? He does all things Lincoln wanted. Then the next year, he gets transferred down to South Carolina, the coastline, and he does the same thing. He declares emancipation in his district. Slow learner, that Hunter. And he was a good friend of this on the state too. He traveled with him to get it from Springfield, Illinois, to go to Washington to take office, and then he accompanied his body back to Illinois after the war when he met with some difficulties. So David Hunter goes and does the same thing down in South Carolina. Lincoln immediately retracted the proclamation and scolded his buddy David Hunter and told him if he wanted to remain a major general, he better watch what he does. Of course, okay. So that's what happened. Now, Lincoln made several very, very overt offers to trade slavery for taxes. Okay? In his first inaugural, he said to the effect that the federal government shall never interfere with the domestic institutions of the states, including that of persons held to slavery, I have no objection to it being made express and irrevocable. That was Lincoln in his first inaugural address. What was he talking about? What was he talking? He was talking about the Corwin Amendment. Anybody familiar with the Corwin? Anybody not familiar with the Corwin? I don't want to belabor it, but the Corwin Amendment was the original 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment that got passed was eliminating or outlawing slavery. The original 13th Amendment, I'll read it to you in a second, was introduced in the Congress by Thomas Corwin of Ohio and in the Senate by William Seward, who was the lackey of Abraham Lincoln. And a lot of people seem to think, the evidence all points to Lincoln wrote this thing. Okay, here's what it says. This is the Corwin Amendment. No amendment shall be made to the Constitution which will authorize or give to Congress the power to abolish or interfere within any state with the domestic institutions thereof, including that of persons held to labor or service by the laws of said state. Okay? Lincoln had no objection to making that permanent and irrevocable. What was that? That was saying to the 7 states that had already seceded, come on back in, let's be one big happy family, let us collect those imposts and taxes again, and you keep your slaves. I'll see to it. I'll make a constitutional amendment and make it so that it can never be repealed. Forever and ever, amen. How do you argue with that? People do. But how do you put up a valid argument to something like that? You can't. Also, in February, the end of February, beginning of March, the Senate, U.S. Senate voted 39-5 to approve that, and it passed the House 133-65 on March 2nd. It passed both houses, and it was already ratified by 3 states. Guess which one of them was? The land of Lincoln, Illinois, which also, in 1862, the next year, passed another anti-Negro law. You cannot come into this state and stay more than a specified amount of time, something like 10 to 30 days or so, or face arrest. They did not want them in there. Because see, what they're looking at is if this war was to, if he actually meant liberate all these slaves in the South, what's going to stop them from migrating up to my backyard in Chicago or Springfield or anywhere else in the North? So many of the northern states started passing these Jim Crow laws, these anti-Negro laws. That was originated in the North to keep them from coming up. What they wanted to do was trap them in the South and not allow them up north. Okay? So the Corwin Amendment was his first offer to trade slaves for taxes. Here's something I'm going to give you. It says Lincoln and Corwin, and it's all about the Corwin Amendment. But there's another thing, and I was talking to Terry and several other people before we got up here, that the Lincoln archivist, a young kid that's all full of enthusiasm, was looking for Lincoln documents. He's scouring the country. He came out of Illinois, and he ends up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, looking through the museums and everything, and he finds, here's a document written by President Lincoln. And you know what it was? It was President Lincoln. A letter to His Excellency, the Governor of Florida. That's how it was addressed. At the time, the governor's name was Madison Stark Perry. He became a Confederate general. He became a Confederate colonel of 2nd Florida when the war started, but because he was term limited. Now, what it was, it said it encouraged him to vote for the Corwin Amendment to ratify it. Okay? Now, the date on that letter was March 14th, 1861. You know what's the matter with that? Why that date should be of concern? Here's a little trivia question. Florida seceded on January 10th. They were no longer a part of the United States. So what was that? That was an offer. Hey, come on back in. I'll trade you loyalty for your slave property. Where do we ever hear about this from the Lincoln lovers? From the people who wrote Team of Liars, and all those other idolatry and propaganda about the great emancipator. This great centralizer. He was a protege of Henry Clay, who was a protege of Alexander Hamilton, the elitist. Those people liked the British form of government. They thought about that what liberals in America today think about socialism. It's failed every time it's tried because the wrong people were in charge. They should let us do it, and it'll work real good. That's the type of person Hamilton was. If we took over this English system of government, we'd make sure there were no abuses, there was no this, there was no... Yeah, right. So look what happened with the U.S. Constitution. How it's gone awry. So the biggest casualty of that war was the Constitution, because this government in 1865, whether we like it or not, changed from a confederated representative republic with a small central government to an all-powerful, strong central government, which is just the opposite. People in Washington are in charge of everything. The states now have hardly any powers at all except what Washington wants to let them have. And if we don't think so, just think about if you didn't do something that the federal government told us to do. They would cut off highway funds, they would cut off this, they would cut... Whose money is that? It's our money that we pay to them. We, as the states, say we represent the state of Tennessee. Our money that goes to Washington is apportioned, some of it, back to us for highway funds, for this, for that. Unless you step over the line, then they'll cut off your funding. So who's in charge of the government? Washington, D.C., strong central government. Same thing they tried to do in Germany. And they succeeded doing under another guy with a little mustache in the 1930s. See how that worked out. U.S. Congress on July 22nd also passed. Anybody heard of the Crittenden-Johnson Resolution? Crittenden-Johnson Resolution. John J. Crittenden from Kentucky had a son that was a general in the U.S. Army and a son who was a general in the CS Army. Both of them. What a convoluted family there. Anyway, and he and Andrew Johnson put this together, and the Crittenden-Johnson Resolution stated that the war was not interference with the rights or established institution of the states, but to preserve the union with the rights of the several states unimpaired. Okay? So they put it in a resolution, an act of Congress, that was not, the war was not about slavery, that it was about what they say, maintaining the union. I mean, even that was wrong, and we'll see that in a minute. But then again, you had Lincoln with Horace Greeley again in 1862. The prayer of 20 million. So he puts in a newspaper that basically was that the prayer of the Northern people that Lincoln should declare this war a war to end slavery. And his purpose in doing that was that would weaken the South. and make it easier for them to win the war. Now Lincoln wrote back and gave a rebuttal to that, and he said, this is beautiful prose. As to the policy I seem to be pursuing, as you say, I have not meant to leave anyone in doubt. I would save the Union. I would save it the shortest way under the Constitution. The sooner national authority can be restored, blah, 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 blah. If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time save slavery, I do not agree with them. If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time destroy slavery, I do not agree with them. My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union and not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union, and what I forbear because I don't believe it would help save the Union. Signed, A. Lincoln, your friend, A. Lincoln. Oh, boy. Okay. Now, let's get to saving the Union. Okay? I want to tell you a little story. It's not mine. It's Tom DiLorenzo's, the guy that wrote the book about the real Lincoln and so forth. And it's a parable. Jesus spoke in parables many times. Build your house on solid ground and stuff, and build from the bottom up, and things like that. Okay? Let me tell you a little story. Young man and a young woman fall madly in love. They are so much in love they get married. And after the first year or so, they even have a baby. And they're just living a blissful life happily ever after. Until time comes around where the old man starts missing his drinking buddies and going out and carousing and stuff. And he's sitting home every night, working every day, coming home every night, changing diapers and mowing the lawn. So he takes a night out and he goes out with his friends. Well, they go out and they get sloshed and they're chasing girls around and they're doing all kind of crazy things. And then he starts doing it more often. What does the wife get out of this? She didn't bargain for this. She didn't bargain for this at all. She said, wait a minute, this is not what I thought was going to happen when we got married. So one night he gets all duded up, puts his cologne on, and he's ready to go out catting around and drinking beer and playing with his friends and so forth. And she goes, just a minute. If you go out, I've got to draw the line somewhere. If you go out tonight, I will not be here when you come back. I did not sign on for this type of treatment. You're abusing our relationship. You're abusing me. And I'm not going to stand for it. So this guy goes, oh yeah? Boom! He cold cocks her. I'll tell you where that came from too. He hits her right in the chops, knocks her down, kicks her, stomps her, beats the snot out of her, grabs her by the hair, drags her into the living room, gets a pair of handcuffs out and cuffs her to the darn furniture. Then he goes in his room and gets his Roscoe. Comes out, sticks it right between her running legs, and he says, if you ever try to leave me again, I'll blow your ugly head off. I'll spread your gray matter all over that wall. What did that nice gentleman just do? Besides commit multiple felonies.
He used overwhelming brutal force to preserve the Union.
He saved his marriage! He saved his marriage! Absolutely saved his marriage. He saved his marriage the same way dishonest Abe saved the Union. By use of brutal force. Absolutely. That's true as we're standing here. I'm standing here and you're sitting here. Okay, as he and I are sitting. But that's what happened. The South didn't sign on to be overwhelmed and outvoted on everything and have their money taken and spent on somebody else's pleasures. See how the parallel? Okay. That's how you save the Union. That's how you save the Union. So, there was a guy by the name of Lysander Spooner who was a northern abolitionist. He was a real abolitionist, a true abolitionist, and a philosopher. And he called Lincoln, Chase, and Seward, and Sumner, and those people fakes and hypocrites and double-faced demagogues. And he never believed the North fought for liberty and justice, but for economic control of the southern markets. He said slavery could have been accomplished by it could have been defrocked or done away with. That could have been accomplished by negotiation, compensation, and without spilling a drop of blood. And he said that The principle on which the war was waged by the North was simply this: that men may rightfully be compelled to submit to and to support a government that they do not want, and that any resistance on their part makes them traitors and criminals. Okay? Here's what Lincoln said to the Albany, New York Committee of Democrats. The suspension of habeas corpus was for the purpose that men may be arrested and held in prison who cannot be proved guilty of any defined crime. There was a charge called suspicion of disloyalty. They put you in jail. Now this is in the South. This is in the North. This is for people who were loyal to the North. If you didn't swear to everything like that, you were going to get arrested. Now, Lincoln went on and said, arrests are not made so much for what's been done or as for what might be done. The man who stands by and says nothing when the peril of his government is discussed cannot be misunderstood. If not hindered by arrest, imprisonment, or death, he's sure to help the enemy. Wow. That's the deal on that. Now, you know what the last nation in North America was to hold slaves legally? The United States. It was not. The people in the border states kept their slaves until well after the 13th Amendment. They went to court and they did all sorts of appeals and things like that. So the United States of America was the last country in on this continent to have slaves. And the last slave state to join the Union was West by God, Virginia. The last slave state. Now wait a minute. Wasn't that carved out of the existing state of Virginia, which is totally illegal according to the Constitution? It's written in the Constitution. You cannot do that without the permission. But see, for that purpose, Mr. Lincoln said, Virginia's no longer a part of the Union. But for every other purpose, it was. It's good to be the king. So West by God, Virginia, about 15% of it that got to vote voted for secession from Virginia and ratify the Constitution of the United States and become a state. And it was, I see what you're doing, but I'm not listening. To become a state, and it was accepted as a slave-holding state. So much for the hypocrisy. Well, there was a lot of hypocrisy. Okay, we're going to pass these things out, and Earl, you want to come and help me pass these things out? Now, by way of ending, I want to come up with a little story that's kind of funny, and it shows the pluck and the sheer determination and grit of the Confederate soldier. Okay? If it's okay, let me walk around here again and stand right out here. Okay? Now, you may have heard this. If you have, just kind of go along with me and humor me a little bit on this. Sherman's march to the sea. After some of the battles, he overwhelmed whatever small resistance was there with him. There was some home guards and some cavalry and so forth, some Georgia militia that were trying to resist. He captured a bunch of soldiers. So they had a bunch of soldiers there in camp, and the colonel gets up and starts giving them a pep talk about galvanizing. He wants them to join a good outfit. And so he's giving them a speech about, if you guys will join us, and we'll send you out there to fight Indians, and you won't have to kill your own people. And there's this one old guy, one old Confederate soldier back there, and he's giggling and laughing. And old grizzled sergeant walks up and says, "Boy, what is so funny? Why are you laughing when the colonel's talking?" And he said, "I was just thinking, we sure whooped y'all the Chickamaugas." And Sergeant, yeah, you must have had a good day. Everybody, we had a bad day. He says, "You're insolent." And he runs back and tells the lieutenant. Lieutenant, he walks over and says, "Hey, I'm Lieutenant so-and-so. What's your problem?" He says, "Well, Lieutenant, I don't really have a problem." He says, "I'm just thinking about the whooping we put on y'all at Chickamauga." And the lieutenant, "Oh yeah!" He says, "Well, yeah, that colonel that's up there speaking, he fought at Chickamauga. And he almost lost his life there." You go, "See what I mean?" No, he said, and he had to make an orderly retreat. And this guy's dying laughing. So the lieutenant gets mad. He runs up. The colonel's done with his speech. He tells him, but the colonel's face turns red as he goes nuts. He runs over to this guy and he says, what will you say? And the guy says, well, Colonel, I don't mean no disrespect. I'm just a poor old foot soldier. He says, but we sure whooped y'all the Chickamauga. And the colonel, he grabs his sidearm. That's his Roscoe. He pulls his sidearm out, sticks it right in this guy's face and says, I have heard enough of you and your insolence. He says, you are going to swear the loyalty oath right now, and you're going to galvanize and become a Union soldier, or I'll blow your ugly rebel head off. Oh, boy, starts thinking, well, I made my point. It ain't no use dying over it. So, he reluctantly swears the oath and signs on to the U.S. Army. So then after that, of course, the colonel's wise. Okay, Sergeant, get this man a uniform and get him some good shoes and get him a nice hat. No firearm yet. He's on a probationary status, but that'll come later. So then he walks over to him and says, okay, wise guy, what do you got to say now that you're one of us? He says, well, sir, there ain't but one thing left to say. Them old Yankee, them old rebel boys over there. I screwed that up. Them old rebel boys over there, they sure whooped us at Chickamauga. Thank you very much. I got to get one little plug. I did write a book about my experiences and when I did online trivia contests and stuff. And that's me, host Gunner. I got 3 or 4 different names. Here's my attaboys that I got from Thomas Cartwright and from Mario Phillips Jocelyn. She's an expert in the area. Also, Dr. Chaltis, who is Robert E. Lee, and Dr. Bradley, who was our division commander, all helped up. And there's a paper galley of what it is. They're screwing me around on how long it's going to take to print this thing, but it should be ready within. I told him I was going to die of old age before I got to read my book. I don't know how long it'll be, a month, 2 months, what have you. But anyway, it will be coming out, and I'll put it on, or I'll send emails around to the camps and let them know it's available. Okay.